You want to start off?
Talking
about what you.
Yeah, sure. And I think specifically in terms of like how improv relates to writing for TV or like even for screen, like when you're writing with a partner or something, you know, it is that collaborative process and you're required to generate a lot of ideas. You're creating out of abundance, like you're working in an ensemble. And it's both like there's a process of like turning off your own inner censor so that you're giving yourself permission to come up with a lot of ideas, even if like there's that voice in your head that's like, here's X, Y, and Z, why this is a terrible idea. And then also it's helping you heighten and make your friend's idea or your coworker's idea even better and stronger and more resonant with the project that you're working on. So I wrote for a TV show called Work in Progress, and I worked on its second season. And that show came about, and I will say like every writer's room works differently and based on the showrunner. And so, so I'm just going to tell you how this one worked. But if you're in a writer's room, you're typically adopting your style to how the showrunner wants to do things. And so, and our showrunner was Lily Wachowski, who directed The Matrix with her sibling, and so she was very generous and really encouraged everyone's. It was more maybe more democratic than other writers' rooms I've heard of, where everyone was encouraged to pitch ideas. So, but that show came about because our friend Abby McEnany, who we both knew in Chicago, had written a one-woman show that was a storytelling show based on her life. And then she and her partner, her creative partner, Tim Mason, wrote a television pilot based on that storytelling show. And then they submitted it to the Sundance Film Festival. It got accepted, I think, in 2019. And I think that was the first year that Sundance was showing pilots. And then from that, they pitched it around to different studios. Showtime bought it, and Showtime produced 2 seasons of it. And so, so I'm just gonna so how I got the job was basically I was friends with Abby. I'd worked with her for a lot of years in Chicago with Improv, and I had directed her in a couple of shows, and I had directed the storytelling show that became that was like the basis for the pilot. So when they were able to hire writers for a writer's room for season 2, Abby invited me to apply. And so I think I found out about it maybe like Thanksgiving of 2019. And then I had to like submit a writing sample, and I had a pilot that I had written. And I don't know if anyone ever read it, but like I had like it was but I got hired. And so then we ended up working for 6 weeks right before the pandemic. And so we had kind of an abbreviated writer's room based on lockdown. You know, we worked together in person for 5 weeks, on virtually the last week, and then like it was kind of a hard shut for maybe a year or so, and then they finished up. Abby and Lily and a couple of writers finished up like the month or so before production. I can't remember the exact timeline, but just to give you an idea of what that experience was like. So it was 6 weeks. The first 2 weeks was pure like pitching. So we were in a room much like this one. There were whiteboards, and we were just generating ideas, like big picture ideas for what would happen in season 2. And typically, when you sell a show, you'll create what's called a Bible. Have you ever heard of that? Okay, so like, so then that would have like a breakdown for a couple of seasons, like with a general idea of like, here's what season 2 or season 3 would look like. And when we started, they had kind of, I think they had decided they had a Bible, but they were interested in seeing what, they weren't wed to it. So they were very eager to hear the ideas. So we were all pitching ideas, and so that was big picture stuff of like trying to remember, like Abby could, Abby canvasses for a politician for the election cycle. Abby takes a writing class, and so it's all that, and maybe you'd have like, it could be as simple as that, or it could be as like, Abby takes a creative writing class and she meets an older student who's also queer, and they strike up a friendship or something. So they, and so all the ideas that Lily and Abby and Tim liked were put on the board. And again, it was very like, so here's why improv helped, where it was just like creating ideas out of abundance, and also like being able to let go of ideas really quickly when they didn't get moved on. And so like, I remember like showing up one day and I was like, I have that like, this is going to be the big arc of season 2, and I've nailed it and everyone's going to love it. And I can't wait to win my Emmy for it. And I was, and so like, and
this is a workshop on how to win.
Yeah. And so like, so yeah, please tell us. And so I, and it was, it was like Abby's gonna take a writing class, and they'll culminate with Abby reading her story at the show in Chicago that's called Paper Machete. That's like an actual show. I was like, this is great, and like it'll be like, because the show is very Chicago centric, and the show is very like celebrating Chicago, and I'm like, and it's also based on Abby's life, and Abby was like, oh no, I don't really. Abby had a thing where she was like, she really liked how her character in the show wasn't a performer, and so it was automatically like that the show, the idea got discarded, and so it was just
your Emmy.
Yeah, and so like it was just fun to be like oh, I have to let go of that one, and that's okay, and like and move on to the next thing. And so and the other thing I'll just say, like, what was wonderful about working with Lily was that, you know, she's the person that she's the gatekeeper. She's the person that you want to, you know, impress, for lack of a better word. And you know, also I knew who she was, and I loved her movies, and I, you know, wanted to, and I think she understood that power dynamic and was really gracious about it. And so like, if you pitched an idea that she let you go, and if you pitched an idea that she didn't like, she said, So like it just kept the temperature of the room very low, and you weren't like devastated when your idea didn't move forward. And you also weren't like egotistic when something moved on. So we spent 2 weeks just generating a ton of ideas, and then we kind of siloed them into, we knew we had 10 episodes, and we siloed them into like 8 episodes. And there were 8 of us, I think, who were writing. And what was very generous of Lily and Abby was that they told us from the get-go that each of us would be writing our own episode. Each of us would be assigned an episode, which is, I think it's unusual for TV, where like generally it would be like, it's different. Like, I mean, I know I have friends who like work on shows where they, you know, like they write specifically for a character, or they write specifically for like a different subplot or something. So it was a gift that we got to write for an entire episode. And so we all got sent off, and I think we had maybe a week or so to write the episode. And then we spent the last 3 weeks just revising, getting notes. And so that again was like, again, improv helped, where like it's that collaborative experience, and you're all on equal footing. So you're learning to take notes and apply them. And also you're learning to like give notes. The fact that like it's peer to peer, and you're figuring out like, how do I not get devastated when someone says like, well, this line's not very funny. This line could be funnier.
I wrote
like,
that.
Yeah. And letting go of that, like with your ego. And then also figuring out how to apply the note. And I think like that's something that as writers, it's kind of like a lifelong journey, because I have a friend who's a writer who had said like the advice he had gotten is to like listen to the note beneath the note. And so, because sometimes people can get very granular and be like, the line of dialogue is, don't eat the cheese, Harrison. but if you land on like, and then they'll be like reconfiguring it to like, where all of a sudden you're like, we're just having an argument about syntax and that's not interesting. But like, but if you're able to hear like, well, something about this line bumped the person. And so like what can I figure out what the actual issue is and how I can apply it. So yeah, so we, I think that's, and the other thing about, will just say about writing for television or writing for movies that's different than like writing a novel, writing a memoir is, you know, it's a visual medium. So everything, you just have to figure out how to externalize what you're talking about. And so, you know, and Abby's show was like intensely personal, like, you know, she's playing a character named Abby, and it's based loosely on her life. And so it was figuring out she did a really great job of figuring out how to make all this like internal stuff that was going on in her brain, like how to externalize it. And so like there were a couple of so like, I mean, in season 1, she's the character has decided that she's given up on life and she's going to commit suicide after she runs out of these almonds that she's acquired. So she has 180 almonds to get through, and each day she eats an almond. So that's like a very direct way of visualizing. Like now the audience has something to track of like, here's these 180 almonds that can represent something bigger and more internal. So that was.
Can you say too, because I don't know, I didn't see it, how many naughty heads there were when you're talking about it. Can you sum up what Work in Progress was? Because
oh, sure.
It's probably a show that's underviewed.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like it's almost impossible to see it now. But
it's a unique project.
Yeah. It's oh yeah. So I think so it's the show about Abby is a 45-year-old queer woman who has the moment that she's given up on life, she falls in love very unexpectedly with someone that she never thought that she'd fall in love with, a young trans man. And so the show, season 1 is really about her figuring out her mental health issues and also navigating this new relationship, and then kind of a bigger exploration of exploring queer relationships through different generations, and also and then also Abby kind of reckoning with identity in a different way, where she would never have, I think the character would not have described herself as queer before, like she was like very strictly lesbian, and then also, but now she's with this new relationship with the character Chris. She's figuring out her queerness and kind of like her own queer identity journey, and then also how her generation of queer friends operate versus Chris's generation. And then season 2 is kind of like a opening up where like Abby's now got her like a better handle on her mental health, and the relationship with Chris has ended, and then she's figuring out the next step of her life, how Abby's showing up for her family, her friends, in a way that she maybe couldn't earlier because of her mental health struggles.
Search it out if you can. I mean, I know it's printable on Amazon and stuff, but it's a unique thing, and she's an amazing personality.
Yeah,
Brenda's really close with it. I'm really close with it. We met through a series of projects in Chicago, and it's a great show.
So I just want to say one more thing. And the other weird thing about, not weird, but the fun challenge of Work in Progress that's different from other TV shows, where like you'll hear like in a lot of TV writing classes of like A plot, B plot, C plot. Like Work in Progress is a more mono-focused show where like Abby was basically in every scene. So like unlike another show where you would like, you know, In the A plot, Monica helps Phoebe apply for a job. In the B plot, Chandler helps Gunther fix the espresso machine. Like Abby was in like the A storyline, the B storyline, and if there was a C storyline. So that was another thing to figure out. Yeah.
I watched that show. I wasn't able to finish it because I lost my subscription.
Oh, yeah.
Like as soon as you said, I was like, oh my god, really?
Yeah.
And that's just so cool. I really enjoyed it, especially its exploration of queerness, and like I thought it was just really special. And
It is
Yeah.
special. It is special.
Oh, that's super kind of you to say. Thank you.
yeah, congratulations.
Oh, thanks.
You wanna talk?
Yeah.
Yeah. So while that show is hard to find, my show would be impossible. My story is a story of successful failure, which I think as relates to improvisation and what our background is part of the game. So like Brendan and I said, we're part of this improvisational theater group called the Improvised Shakespeare Company. We've worked together for a very long time. And that is the source of everything I've done creative, or at least improv, not the Shakespeare Company necessarily. But when we all started in Chicago as a group and as performers, eventually we made this migration to Los Angeles, and a quorum from our group had made our way to LA and would sit down regularly. We would do this show that it's a very acclaimed for an improvisational show. So take that as you will. It's a great improv show. So everyone who loved improv saw it, but not everyone loves improv. So, but it was really successful in LA. We had all this great industry coming. Producers and casting agents and you know, celebrities of different degrees to our show. And the question naturally was always like, what else are you guys working on? And so we were trying very hard. It became evident to us that we should work on a project together. So there were 4 of us that had made our way out to LA, and we sat down seriously to have talks about an idea to pitch. And we had enough conversations. There's I don't know how familiar you are with how things work, but in Los Angeles, there's a kind of meeting you have that's called the general meeting. And that's exactly what it is. And it couldn't be a more descriptive and unhelpful term, because it really is, you sit down with people. It could be a casting agent, it could be a producer, it could be an executive at a studio or something. And they want to sit down, maybe they saw our improv show 2 weeks before. It says, the Shakespeare guys, great, have a seat. We'll get you anything. You guys are amazing, amazing. I love your show. So good, you guys are geniuses. God, I don't know how you think of that stuff. So good, that's so cool. What else? What did you guys, where are you from? What you doing? Cool, good meeting. And you're like, we didn't do anything. But sometimes the question would come up like, what else are you guys working on? So it became evident, we should have a project. Like we should be writing something. And so it became evident that we should write a project. And then our improv brain had to kick in. And so we started meeting as a group of 4 and tried to come up with an idea that we could pitch as a television show. That seemed to be the best way to go. And so my story is very much on how to use improvisation as not only writing a show, writing a pilot, but also pitching that show. How do you sell this thing? And it's an ugly monster. It's difficult to get your hands around. And like Brendan was saying, every writer's room is different. I think every process that you go through, and especially today, is going to be different as well, because of the way that the landscape is to overuse it, or the media landscape and how these things work. But our story in brief was, we have this background of improvising the show in the style of Shakespeare. That's what our show looks like. It looks like people improvising the play, and they've read enough Shakespeare where they can kind of ape the style and then they play with those characters. We didn't want to do that exactly, but we loved the highbrow, lowbrow element of Shakespeare. We loved the kind of refined, almost like over academic view of Shakespeare, and the hoity-toityness of that, the snobbery of that. And so the idea we got most excited about, after spending a lot of time pitching a bazillion ideas to each other, and like Brendan said, you'd be like, I know what it is. I know what it is. It's a Shakespeare-themed restaurant, blah, blah, blah. And everyone would be like, oh, we'll put it on the board. You're like, oh, that was my best one. Okay, it's dead. It's already dead. But the idea that everybody got behind was, and this is what our show kind of became, the show ended up being titled Pembroke Academy. And the idea was, I don't know if people still watch this movie. You ever seen Dead Poet Society? It's upper crust private boarding school. And you can't tell if it's the 30s, the 50s, or the 90s. And people are just still living this archaic way. But Pembroke Academy was a private boys boarding school. And the whole idea, it started, when we began, the whole story was going to be more like a sketch show. It was going to be like Portlandia meets Dead Poet Society. And everything would be a different scene in this world. And when it started, our big amazing idea was the four of us would play every character. We'd be the students, we'd be the professors, we'd be the townies, we'd be the parents who come in for Parents Weekend. And when we first started having general meetings and pitch that, everyone, this is a big genius. Well, when we set up another meeting about that call never comes. So it's like that, and that's an LA thing that we all discovered. It's like everyone's very positive. It's sort of a culture of uncritical positivity. It's in a lot, and very often kind of meaningless. That's not to say LA is meaningless, but it was like, I think I had to get used to it. Like, I know this guy's going to call us genius, but we needed to hear the note. What did he say he liked? What did she like when she said, I love the Survivor show? Because we try to kind of follow up on those things. But anyway, the first iteration of our show was that it was a borderline sketch show. You follow all the different characters and worlds of this refined, very 1%-y entitled class. And we thought there was satire in that. We also loved the idea of being able to give a fake lecture on something really, really esoteric to camera. We were so entertained by it. The first, and then the process became, well, now who do we pitch this to? So as someone who's going to pitch something, it's very important to know, well, what are you pitching and who are you pitching to? Because the first thing we did was, because of the success of our show and because of the connections that our manager, we had a manager by that point for our show who helped book a lot of gigs for us, and she opened some doors for us in LA. Who did she know? She got a foot in the door to a production company. They're called Abominable Pictures. They produce a lot of things. If you've ever seen like Wet Hot American Summer, like that kind of culty movie, that group of actors, that ensemble is kind of their wheelhouse. We got our foot in the door to pitch to the executive producer of Abominable Pictures. And we knew he was a friendly face. We pitched to him. He was like, I like this. I will help you get in other doors. So at that point, we're not even pitching a show. We're pitching him on helping us open up more opportunities. It's a little bit exhausting. And so the cool thing about our improv background is you have this collaboration is a big part of it, but so is adaptability and positivity. And being able to say, that was a victory today, let's go get lunch. We have a guy who said, I'll help you if I can. His thing was, first place I want to do is get you in the door of another production company that can help us some money. This is not a person who can put us anywhere. They can't put us on television, but they can give us a little more money to maybe shoot something down the road. So we pitched successfully to Abominable Pictures who said, I like that idea. All we had is an idea. Then we went to Sonar Productions and we pitched to them, and successfully, but with restraints. Sonar said, we like this and this and this. And so you again are facing an onslaught of notes. And that is a challenge because a lot of times you feel like you're funnier and smarter than the person you're pitching to, but they're going to be some people with the power. So we had to take some notes from them. And our show started to change its shape, and that was okay. And then once we had Sonar and Abominable on board, we were like, get us in some rooms. We'd like to pitch to some networks. And it became quickly evident that we needed to create something more to take into these networks. And nobody wanted to see a pilot script. What they wanted to see, what we then had to write was essentially what you call a sizzle reel. We had to give a proof of concept short film of our show. And that was a huge labor. You're writing a pilot, you're writing a script for a 7-minute, 5-minute piece that no one's ever going to see outside of the rooms you're pitching it. And that took a long time. We had to produce it, we had to cast it, we had to write it. And writing together with 3 other people that are your very close friends, because we had a lot of history at this point, was wonderful and difficult. And you guys don't know any of these people, so it doesn't have to be dramatic. But like, the 4 of us would write really well together, and there became a trend over a period of our a stretch of our time, where one person's ideas were not anyone's favorites, and it was consistently one person's ideas. And we had to figure out, and it wasn't me, but it doesn't matter. But we had to figure out how to juggle the dynamics of, we keep saying we you know, when you're generating ideas, put all the ideas before, but when you start narrowing it down, this guy's ideas tend to be the first one off the floor. And so it became a conversation. We had to find ways of keeping all spirits high while also getting critical. And that was hard. And everybody knew what was going on. And we managed, I think, because of there's a philosophy in improvisation, even if you've never taken an improv class, of this, the spirit of the thing is called yes and, yes, that's a great idea. And we were basically saying to this person, like, no, but it's not a great way to communicate. So we had to take stuff. What's great is you could take stuff this person said and start, and you could build on it until it changed a little. And maybe then we could work in that idea. So this person's ideas aren't being unheard. They're adapting. And all of them were too. But anyway, the group dynamics were challenging in places. So basically we created the sizzle reel of Pembroke Academy, and we pitched it to True TV, to YouTube Red, which was a platform that might still exist, to Comedy Central, to TBS, to Showtime, to Hulu. And we were having meetings after meetings after meetings that were all going awesome because they were so positive about it. And then we wouldn't hear anything. We'd occasionally get notes, but going into those rooms, not only did we then have, we had crafted this show, this idea, and we had to be very specific about the idea. We had to know who were the main characters in this thing, who are the characters we'll follow, what's the tone of this show? Is it funny in the way of Portlandia, or is it funny in the way of 30 Rock, or is it funny in the way of, a multicam Big Bang Theory? What's the tone of this thing? Is everything for laughs? Do we care about any of the characters? And so those are the questions we had to have ready to answer, and in basically the treatment, the documents that we took into places. We didn't quite have a Bible. We didn't need a Bible yet at that point. But we had enough pages of stuff. And then all of a sudden, we had to also work together to craft a pitch. 4 of us in the room, not all. Oh, and another good thing to say, but we, and sound like a bunch of clumsy voices. We basically had a script to pitch and then deliver it so it didn't sound totally scripted. We all had our lines to say. I'll talk about this guy. I'll talk about this. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, we even had script, by the end, it was scripted enough to be like, that's really funny. I've said that's really funny in that spontaneous way a million times to my friend. And nothing was happening. And then finally, the last place we pitched to, and this place rescheduled our meeting, I think literally 6 times. And that's spreading over almost a calendar year. We had pretty much given up on this project. Say our last pitch was in January to a place. We had something scheduled with Pop TV in February. And we finally sit down and meet with Pop in October. And by the time it was in October, we had all been like, Pembroke's dead. And Pop met, and a week later, they were like, yeah, we'll buy a script from you. So that's the success of my failure, because you'll never find Pembroke Academy. But we did sell a script. So to the idea of being an employed and working professional, we made money off of that. We made, and we sold that right before pandemic. My first year of lockdown was spent writing with those guys, writing this pilot script on Zoom, being compensated for it when we could do no more live performance. And so it was a successful employment opportunity. We wrote it, we delivered it, they passed on it, it never got produced. We took that completed script, moved it on to one other place, tried to sell it to like Warner Brothers. They also passed on it. And the guy we met with on the first day for Profitable Pictures was the one who had to tell us, guys, this was awesome. This is a great experience. It's over, And the cool thing there is, beyond that, we still have contacts with those producers, and we will continue to work on other things with them. I'm working on a game show project with one of them. Not what I ever thought I would actually work on. So doors were open. But the improvisational background in sitting around in a room being like, guys, we have to create a performance for the room that shows everything, looks spontaneous, looks collaborative, looks like we're fun to work with. So we would also end it like we had written the alma mater for Pembroke Academy, and our pitch would end with us saying, so that is an introduction to Pembroke Academy. There's really one other thing we could say, and that is, I think we would sing it a cappella with harmonies, and it was scary as hell. And usually it went really well. We did have one pitch experience where the guy at the end, I don't remember which network it was. I'll say it was True TV.
You're being
online.
recorded.
I know, that's true. I don't know who it was, but the guy we pitched to said, "This is fun, guys. I'm so hungover. I'm gonna remember none of this." But thanks again. And it was so obvious, it's awful. And then why did we waste our time in there? But the resilience that comes with knowing like work can be disposable, work can be positive, it can be positively generated, and it can go away was very helpful. And you know, thick skin, short memory, all the cliches were kind of important in that situation. Also, when we were writing, I should also say that our show changed drastically over all told, from the first meeting with Abominable Pictures to the day the guys from Abominable Pictures told us it was dead, was about 4 years. It's a long time frame. It's geological time to your mind, sort of. And many times it went on hiatus. But in the time frame we started, when it was basically a borderline sketch show that takes place in a boarding school, the end product was a much more narrative piece based on a lot of notes we had, and the way, and in the shifting of just like the television landscape, you would hear things that might be really valid insider information and might be red herrings, where people would say nobody's buying sketch anymore. If you go in and say it's remotely close to sketch, no one's going to buy. And then your narrative is either, great, I took the notes and I crafted what you wanted, or you're the story, or you say, I'm doubling down. And the story is, when everybody said sketch was dead, they reinvigorated sketch. So you don't know which line you're on, and maybe you make the mistake and pick the wrong one. But it ended up becoming a thing. The narrative was more about a graduate of this school that had gone off to pursue the life, and it was roped back into being the headmaster in a changing world when the whole world was looking at places like Pembroke Academy as being like this upper crust 1% elite of white male privilege, or whatever phrases in 2021 were at the most visible and audible was the world was cracking open Pembroke Academy, and this little hermetic world had to open up, and this new headmaster had to help change the world. It became more of a dynamic, character-driven piece, and all of us settled into roles of professors and whatnot, and deans and things like that. So it morphed a lot. There was a lot of change going on. But in the writing process, there's even a point, because of our improv background, where we booked a show a couple of nights at an improv theater and went in and to the audience is, we lied to the audience and said we're improvising our show, but we went in with like, we were improvising, but it'd be like, I'm going to be a guy like Dean character or whatever. And so let's improvise. So we're improvising to write in front of an audience, generating material that would fit script. That was valuable. It got us a lot of things we didn't want to do, and it got us a couple of cool ideas that we did want to follow up on. So it was a lot of processes and a lot of places where we were using sometimes strict improvisation, but also very often just like an improvisational mindset. And Brendan and I, neither one, I think, feel necessarily like we're old. We've been outside of we've been working as adults for a while now. Like I graduated in 2000, graduated in 98. I do think there was a time when I would hear stuff about improvisation, about like, it's nice to be in a world where everybody says yes and yes and, kind of took it for granted. Going into into not just places like in LA where you're pitching things, where you're writing and you're creating things artistically and creatively, but also being in, like, I have kids, being in PTA meetings, being in Cub Scout meetings, working with people outside, you realize how programmed the world is against yes and knowing that the value you can get from hearing someone's idea, and before you say the 10 reasons it won't work, saying, oh yeah, and you could also do this with that, it really changes the culture of a room. And I like to think that there's more rooms in television, in creative arts that are like that. But I know for the fact there's a lot of them where you say, there could be an episode where they play a big football game and people say, there's no way we're going to find a place to shoot the football game. Okay. They could be in that classroom again. Yeah. You know, and you're like, oh, I'm stuck in a rut where everything's the same thing. And so it would be really, it's really cool when someone's like, it could be the big game. Oh, that's amazing. I love the idea of like a big game. You could set it in the locker room. Maybe you don't even see the game, but like we see the pre-game speech, we see the halftime speech, we see after. and we're building, we still have all the stakes of the big game, but maybe we're not worrying about the production value of shooting at the Rose Bowl.
You're solving the problem.
You're solving the problem
yeah.
that no one ever shot you down with. And there's a lot of value in that, outside of creative as well, but like, and then that person who had the idea for the big game has been listened to. That's a mine. If you think about, if you dehumanize the process and think about that person as a gold mine, instead of caving in the mine and making it, so self-conscious they'll never offer anything up again, you can return to that mine. That person's gonna have more ideas. We're all human. We like to be told, cool, and that person now is likely to give you more ideas and help you solve your problems and help you, yes and build on top of your ideas. So that was extremely valuable. And while that show is gone and we're not returning to that show, and in different groupings, we're writing other projects, that history is now a forward-moving thing instead of a failure film. And I made money at a time when nothing was being produced and I couldn't go on the road with it too. So that's why I think for me, it was a big success. That's sort of our philosophy, I think, on some of those things. And I think what would, we could open up questions now. We'll definitely have time for questions as well in a minute. But what we would like to do first is this. So because we are improv, what we would love to do is just break up into groups of like 3 or 4. You don't have to know everyone in the group. So why don't we do 2 groups of 4? So hi, welcome. You came in after we started. What was your name? Ted. Hey, if we could do like 4 and 4, does that work?
Yeah.
In a second.
Okay,
No,
Oh, right, yeah.
So this is an improv exercise, and we'll do this very briefly. But if you could get to where you can all see each other, here's your first challenge. Just so you can communicate. You guys need to move or whatever. That's fine. That's totally fine. Totally artificial, weird scenario. You're planning a party together before you're planning a party. Who cares what it's about? You don't have to say that. But someone should identify themselves as person A, someone else as person B, and someone else as person C. But for now, just know who person A is. And person A, you're going to be the idea person. And no matter what ideas for this party person A gives, the rest of you, your job, again, very artificial, is to say no and tell them why it's a bad idea. It's corny, but let's just practice in that world. So for now, person A, give ideas for things you can do for the party. All the different elements of the party. Everyone else, say no. Go for it. Person A.
I don't know. I don't like it. Sounds restricted. Yeah.
What if 6-year-olds party? Teenagers party. Yeah, that's on the house. Yeah. Okay, that seems dangerous. You're looking at a lot of property.
You're still excluding. Yeah, that's true. Also, like the neighbors, you gotta be considerate of them.
Yeah, I think so too. And whether or not they share those,
All right, bring that to a close, that exciting conversation. And now pick someone else. So you're your next speaker. This is your person B. Someone else someone else new to generate ideas. You might hear certain ideas repeated or there's only so many things, but there's infinite things for a party. And now everyone else in their responses to those ideas must begin their sentence with no, but. So let's get pretzels. We should have pretzels. No.
Oh, no, because like,
Yeah,
no,
no.
because, right? Sorry.
Yes, no, oh, yes, but, sorry.
Yes.
No, we already did. Yes, but. We should get pretzels. Yes, but there's pretzels. So yes, but. Good? All right, keep going.
I'll give you this.
And Larissa, Avery,
what were we talking about?
You guys
do it on your.
Let's forget what type of party it is. Let's just focus on, I guess, decorations. So we should probably have some streamers.
Yes, but we don't have too many, ceiling, the walls.
Well, maybe we should just, I mean, balloons are kind of a part of the staple.
Yes, but there's a shortage of helium right now, so we shouldn't have too many, so we're not helium. We gotta save the environment.
Let me think. Well, environment, huh? Well, maybe we should just, I suppose I'm now thinking of cutlery, maybe plastic is out, so should we just use the silverware that we have on hand?
Yes, but I think you have to consider the safety, because those are real knives and forks, pieces of true harm.
This is true. Okay, so how about we just all eat the
All right, wrap that up. I bet
Here's
you'll
an
see where this is
idea.
going. So now person C is going to give ideas and all your responses have to be yes and. That's it.
Sure. All right, parties aren't parties without clowns. You gotta hire a clown, have him there the whole time.
Okay. I think we should also bring in a magician.
Yes.
Clowns and magicians.
Clowns and that's a recipe. That's a memorable night.
I like that, but a DJ would make it so much better. Clowns, magicians,
And a DJ, yes,
and they
yes,
could
you gotta
perform
have
to some kind of theme music.
yes, yes, I think that, and if they could all like, coordinate so that the performances sort of intertwined together. So then you've got, DJ, we've got a clown doing his clown act, and a magician doing magic with maybe his clown stuff, so it's funny, but interesting. There's also time for the music, so it's very.
All right, go ahead and wrap that up too. Thank you for indulging in a silly improv exercise. And I don't know how many of you guys have ever taken an improv class before. Never, so newer. Any observations on that? Again, I know it's artificial. I know maybe it's corny to think about sitting in a room and actually using the word yes and all the time. Does the sentiment of that make sense to you? Of the difference in yes and yes but?
Yeah.
Any observations beyond that? Anything that was novel or different or noteworthy? Yeah. I'm sorry. Chloe.
Yes. When we said the yes, but we were still focusing on the writers a little bit. So
Yeah.
but as soon as we said yes, and each of us were bouncing off each other much faster.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Like I went faster than, like I was trying to come up with something and then it wasn't really going anywhere. And we
Right.
ended on class.
I thought I heard clowns.
Yes,
Yeah.
clowns is over here.
That's the lesson.
Yeah.
Lights out.
But yeah, I think just similar to what they were saying, is that the sort of just the speed at which the idea built, and it feels like it felt like we were giving sort of generic answers and reasons when we were doing the no and the yes, but. But when we did yes and, we ended up with a combination magician clown DJ act, which I don't think we would have come up with normally.
Okay, yeah, I think that's yeah, and it remains to be seen whether or not that's really a good idea for a party. But the lesson in that is true that the ideas that you never would have seen coming, you can surprise yourself with a party. If that the culture of yes and is in the room. I think we agree with that. And what it's very easy to understand how many people for that's a thing, but there's also a real benefit and a real it's real important to yes and yourself sometimes too, especially when you're coming up with ideas staring at a blank page. I have your blank pages here. So we're gonna do a little quick exercise. It's a small little note card. There's a reason it's small. Small is simple. Small is distilled. Small is refined. That's please. I don't really believe that everything that's important in your life should be able to fit on a note card, but for this little project, that's the case. And what I'm going to ask you to do, you use the pencil if you want, or use your own writing. If you want to tell people they had different stuff, so we brought little supplies. Here's what I want you to do. You're going to make a couple of lists. I want you to make a list of, so the idea is right now, no matter what writing projects you've got on the back burner or you've been working your brains out on for the last 10 years, ideally, this is a new way, you're generating it here today. I want you to think of a couple of things, so it's time to kind of personalize it. One, I want you to make a list of the most generic way to say it is problems you see in your life. It doesn't have to be, it can be broad, it can be small, it's a list, so you can make a lot. What are things that are hangups in your life, obstacles in your life, things that annoy you with life, with the world? What are the problems you see that directly affect you, whether they are extremely personal to your family, to your employment, your situation, where you live, or your globally that affect you. So it's a list. So again, there's a million different ways to go down. One list is problems. Another list that I think is valuable, and this should fit on your card as well, it's on the reverse side or on the bottom of your card, is a list of things that you think are that are unique about your life experience. Some of us feel like we have an extremely unique life experience. Some of us feel like, and I would probably, in most times of my life, feel like I lean towards the second group. I'm a little bit, what do I have that's going on? You listen to Brendan explain Abby's life and work in progress and what she based that show on, very much her own life. From where I stood, that's a very unique and engaging world to navigate. Me, not as much. But I think about things like, for me, what's unique about my life? I need a Cub Scout cap. That's unique. Not a lot of people do that. It's weird. I'm somebody who likes to study Latin. You know, it maybe the things you think of yourself, you kind of make fun of yourself for, or your friends kind of like, you weirdo, in a nice way. Anyway, things that you feel are unique about yourself. Make those lists now. Just take a little time, make those lists. Problems, and then things that are unique about you.
Awesome. So that I take a look.
Oh, what did you say? Anything about it? And there's no number of things you have to make a list of. So we'll wrap it up in about a minute, and whatever you generated, I'm gonna put any required deliverable on this as far as water goes. All right, just finish writing your last one. And here's the next step of what I want you to do. I want you to look at these. These are all seedlings. These aren't even seeds. Beginnings of seeds of what could potentially be a project you're writing by yourself or with collaborators. All of these are that kind of thing. But I want you to do this just for the feeling of it. Maybe look at your list, and I want you to cross through the two you love the least. Think of them as important people to you, and you're burning away to it. And just narrow your list a little. Cross off a couple.
You want two for each list or?
No, just two things. It's yeah, good question. It's one comprehensive list, even though you had two assignments, but just burn a couple. Maybe it's easy, probably easy. You probably put more ideas down than you were excited about. You might be easy. And look at what's left. Maybe you have 3, maybe you have 4, maybe you have 10. I don't know. Maybe you have 1. Where we obviously were, maybe obviously going now, is I want you to look at the one that resonates with you the most. And here's what I want you to think about. Is there a world? So if my problem is, okay, I'm a boring guy, and my biggest problem these days is my car's pretty bad. What's a world where that's something that I can address? Is it DMV? Is it a mechanic shop? DMV, that's weird. It shows up DMV. No. So what a weird, sterile feeling, conflict-riddled place. What's one of these places you can see a show in? You're basically thinking of a world. What's the world of this show? This is all, this idea you may not even carry out of this room. But right now, addressing something unique about yourself, me, Joey. I literally am a Cub Scout leader for my 10-year-old son. That's a juicy world. It's weird characters. It's a bunch of parents. It's a bunch of people in silly uniforms. It's a bunch of kids at different ages. That's definitely my world. So think of a world you would have fun living in as a viewer, as a writer. Think of that. You can write it down if you want. Just circle your idea. Think that this is what I don't know how what's left over. I'm going with this thing. And then, very often, a character, you're going to want a protagonist in the show. Who is the person in this world? For me, it's Joey. It's this dad who got saddled with the responsibility of leading this Cub Scout. It's much more responsibility than I wanted, and it's totally volunteer, and it's a lot of time, no money, a lot of stress. That's the seed of my show. It's Joey, the Cub Master, and he works in a Cub Scout path with a bunch of characters. That's my start. So, do any of you feel like you have something that's whittled down to a point where you could say, yeah, basically, it's a show about, I can give them a name. It's a show about this person who's in this kind of world. Anybody want to share anything they've got from their It's an exercise, so it's not anything we have to be like, ooh.
And we also know that we've deliberately been like, think about your life and your personal problems, and write them down. So
It doesn't have to be overly personal.
don't feel like you need to share it, but if someone.
Anybody has something they want to share.
Yeah.
Or they feel comfortable. So.
Yeah.
We have a show about a brand new personal trainer who works at a gym, different people that he interacts with.
Awesome.
That's a start.
Great.
Yeah. Brand new personal trainer. We can imagine the stakes of that kind of thing and the kind of people that person might run into. Great. We don't have to. Do you want to?
Oh yeah. Sorry. So now that you have the protagonist, you have the world. Think about, and maybe you've just naturally, if you have the protagonist, if you've naturally just thought of other people who could exist in the world, that's great. If not, don't worry about it. But now think about 10 events that protagonist or that other people in the world could be doing. And really just think, when I say events, it's just like if you were standing, if you were looking at them through the glass, through an observation glass, you would see them doing these things. So it's for the Joe example, the Cub Master breaks the Pinewood Derby car of a scout. The Cub Master burns his hand on a campfire. The Cub, so it
has to fire another parent from their job because they're being they're risking the kids' lives by going on crazy hikes. The Cub Master leaves the kids onto it.
Yeah, the camp takes a crazy hike. So really think of how you can write the sentence concisely and have a strong action verb that so instead of saying Brendan dreams about having a new job, Brendan applies for a job. Does that make sense?
5 instead of 10.
Yeah.
Do 5. Come up with 5 actors.
And again, I mean, if it helps to think of if you were a bird flying over the location, what would the bird see?
I didn't turn those in.
Yeah.
We'll know your notes.
Give them to us, and these are now our ideas.
It worked, Brendan, it worked.
Yeah.
That's right. That's the original title of this workshop was Get Brendan's Emmy. And I stepped in to try to help, but I didn't have the skills.
If I ever get to do another of these workshops, I just want to have like the most pathetic, like, please hire me in 3 years. Like,
Yeah,
just
you guys.
desperate.
So as you wrap that up, there is no deliverable. You do not have, you should not, you will not turn these into us. But when we pitched, I can say from my angle, when we pitched Pembroke and we wrote out a treatment for the Pembroke Academy show, what we basically had to come up with was, it would all eventually culminate with, you call a log line. It was basically a 1-sentence structure, like just a distillation of the show. Our treatment that we would hand off and what we would basically say in our pitch was, here's the world. It's a refined upper crust, almost British New England boys school. It's been private. It's been around forever. It's kind of on its last legs. It's 10th place in the fictional private school cup of honors, but they're trying. Our main character is Pamela. Pamela was once a student here. Pamela has returned to take over the headmaster's job and does not want it, and is everything dumped into her lap as problems. We would also give, here's 5 other characters that are in the show. And then we would say, here's what the pilot episode might look like. It's Pamela's first day, and she has to immediately handle parents' weekend. She has to answer questions from parents who want to know everything's changing. And then what they always wanted to know was like 5 more episodes. And it had to be, like Brendan was saying, it had to be really active and it had to be driven from a character point of view, because it's very easy to get too good a picture and say, oh, and then there's one where it's like there's a food fight. Like, that's not a show. That's something that might happen in that show, but we have to start, who's doing what? We would think of fun events, but we had to come up with like, and here's 10 possible episodes we have. And that was the kind of thing that places wanted to hear, and that would give them, that they could say yes or no to that kind of thing. And so I guess in summary from what we were saying is we've had success as writers based on, and a lot of our success, we feel like what was helped was our background in improvisation and living in a culture of yes and, of positivity, of adaptability, of cooperation and collaboration. I don't think there would be a workshop where people would say, no, it's all no, but don't collaborate, don't cooperate. But it's worth doubling down on the idea that there's value to that, and that it's really important as a professional, wherever your career goes, whatever your aspirations are, that's really important.
Because also, like, especially with writing, you might find yourself in a situation where like you have to deliver something that the showrunner or your boss or whatever, like it's an idea that's counter to what you want to do, but you have to support that idea 100% and deliver, and figure out a way to make it work. And so, yeah,
for sure. Yeah. So thank you for helping Brendan get his Emmy.
yeah.
And I guess that we're like slightly overtime, but we've got another butt time. If you guys, we're happy to answer questions. If you need to leave, go ahead. We kind of go on to 2 o'clock. But any questions you have, we're happy to answer as well. Thanks for your time.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
When you guys did the improv thing, you mentioned before, when you were working together and you were actually writing,
Oh yeah.
you put stuff up on the board. You're talking like if you have a dry erase board and you guys just kind of improv through that and you come up with these creative lines and then you rack and stack them.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you do?
At
or
different
like,
points in the
what's that
process, there'd be
like?
different stuff on the board. for what we were doing, yeah, we did have like a dry erase board. And it started with more like when we started, it depends on what point of the process you're talking about. But let's say when we were writing our actual script, we knew kind of what this world was. It was things like, let's take this guy. He is there's one of our characters was named Gunch. He was sort of like he was the villain of the piece, so to speak, and didn't want anything to change. And he had a job that was like some labyrinthine title of like Chancellor to the Provost's proctorship or something, like some inherited title or something. And we would come up with what are things that Gunch could be doing. He's trying to get her fired, and before he moves to how, so he's trying to get Pamela fired. He's organizing a cabal of student revolutionaries. He's deliberately trying to start a school somewhere else. He's reaching out to a competing school to offer services there. It was making lists on a board and doing exactly that. And sometimes it would be kind of like categories, like quadrant up the board and say like, let's think of fun things for Gunch, let's think of fun things for this. We never did figure out who this other character, like we want this character to come in. At one time we had a character in the show. I wouldn't say this is not a story about like Ted Lasso stole our idea. It's not that at all. But we had a character who was like, what if we had like a real Texan football coach come in and try to teach football to the kids at Pembroke, who are all these kind of frail upper crust kids. But it was like, let's think of like a bunch of different outsiders to come into the room. Yes, it was racking and stacking on a dry erase board. I mean, I think you guys did stuff similar, like that's how your process is.
Yeah, and I think like literally when we would pitch ideas, it would be kind of like those one-line event things. And so that would be what was written down and put on the board. And then based off like, and sometimes like, an idea would catch fire in the room and then everyone would just be like piling on the idea. So but like the main idea would be written down, like Abby attends her new stepbrother's graduation party. And then people like, and then it's like, oh yeah. And then her dad could give the stepbrother an outlandish graduation gift. Oh yeah. And the party is super fancy. Yes. Like, and so I think like there were a lot of times that there were like the main idea written and then like in smaller text, like lines of dialogue that people liked or,
Right.
that builds on the idea so that we wouldn't.
Eventually you get to like a punch-up stage where you're like, let's think of 10 different names for that dorm. Much more granular, but it's funny to pitch the name of it, like a very specific, we gotta think of a funny name for that new dorm they're building. And what's the funniest sound? It was, let's big picture by a long shot. As Brendan was saying too, like in work in progress, I hadn't thought about this, that like Abby was in all the scenes, you had very few like evident B subplots. When we were pitching ideas for shows, you think of it very much like the way Brendan was talking about Friends a minute ago, where you wanted to say something like, so it would be something like Pamela has to take the Model UN group to a private school Model UN function in Rhode Island. Meanwhile, Gunch reinvigorates a secret society on campus that will eventually take her down. You have like the bang and then the meanwhile, and meanwhile, this particular student that we've introduced, we had some Bumby, whatever. Bumby goes home. Bumby is ill and goes and spends time home. Bumby, the scholarship student, goes home and we see Bumby's hometown in some little poor community or something like to get a contrast. So you would be writing those things and coming up with B plots. I mean, if that's this is the main thing. Let's think of like 10 different B plots that we go over the different characters at the same time, with the idea that if we wrote it out, that they would somehow enhance or collide. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah.
That's the idea.
Inside.
So in your different pitching experiences, either pitching to producers or pitching in a room, do you find that there is something more successful than the other in terms of pitching concept versus maybe pitching character? Or is there like a little bit of both? Like, do you think you've gotten more or less notes on like a concept pitch versus something related to the characters working with that, which you think would be like more important?
My answer would be real short, okay, but I would say largely the notes we would get back from, I know specifically we pitched to like the early production company. And even sometimes, because the production company is going to work with us in some perpetuity, whereas the networks could just say no, they didn't feel the need to give us many notes. Most of the notes would come based on character stuff, and it would be like, but who are we really behind? And why are we behind this person? Why do we like this person? What's at stake for this person? They seem to be much more character driven than larger tonal elements or big picture, like conceptual elements.
Yeah, and like now thinking about it, like pitching in a writer's room, I'm realizing like you have the parameters already set. So a lot of the times you're pitching to support an idea that's already been established. Like, so for example, if like, like one of the themes of the show was, for example, was like Abby's relationship with a different generation of queer people. So then all of a sudden you're thinking of like, well, what are the things I can pitch that support like what the show is trying to do? So in that sense, I feel like they had already, I think by the time you're in like writing a show, the concept is already established, and like you're pitching to see like what are the characters that can exist in the world, what's the thing that can exist in the world that the show is trying to do that supports the goals of the show. Yeah.
Nobody wanted to hear a concept without characters. I think
Yeah.
people could be really excited about a character and not know exactly fully the big picture, the full conceptual framework of the show. They would always ask about this character.
When you're describing what was it?
Pembroke Academy.
So that's, it's like really like it's obviously
Thanks.
something that you think highly of. But how was it? What was the process like for, I guess, like getting closure to that? Or if you got a call tomorrow, like out of the blue, and someone was like, do you want to make this? Is that something you would just pick up right where you started?
Definitely. I think we could be reinvigorated on that thing very quickly. And then we would be very daunted by the end of like but very daunted because we would be saying what version are they want. Is it that the latest thing? Are we still as passionate about it as we were when we left it off? And I think that's kind of like there was closure on it, but it's almost like a petering out. When he told us it was dead, I think we were like, oh, I didn't even know you had to tell us. I think we kind of knew. Thank you for telling us. Thank you for giving us a button on the end of this. We're ready to move on. But like you're saying, a year later, some of these like Warner Brothers called and they were like, what about the private school idea? You guys want to get going? We'd immediately call a meeting. They'd be like, cool, let's read over the pilot again. We did write the script. We got paid for the script that we wrote. Let's look through it. Oh my, I would change this and this and this now. We would have changed a lot too. So, but I guess short answer, we would get started on that because it was a very rich world. We always felt, and I think probably writers feel this way, or creative people feel this way, like, I'm not sure you're totally hearing everything I'm trying to tell you right now. You're not seeing fully, what can I do to show you how fun it would be? And the way we had to communicate very often was, it would have to be very delineated, very clear. Here's what the character says, and here's what the character does, and here's how people react to it. Because in our mind, it was such a rich environment. And we had one version of the show where it was like, you would have a camera moving down the hall and it would turn into this room. And it'd be like a bio lesson. And we could imagine being on stage improvising that, how funny it would be improv-wise. Camera would pull out, go down the hall. And like that was how the show was going to maybe be, like just a tracking camera going through Pembroke on the elevator. There's a scene on the elevator, it moves on. It was constantly switching characters. That's before we got fully focused in on one. And I think that was the saddest part of the whole process was like, did we communicate to you how fun this would be? Like part of me just wanted to sit down and show them Dead Poet Society, which I know they'd seen, and be like, this is a very serious movie, but can't you kind of laugh at like this world? Isn't it funny? Like, and so that was did we leave anything on the table off the that they didn't see? But we'd get started.
And I think it depends on like what your project is. Like if you have a project that's like super close to who you are and like your life, like it's a version of your life story.
Oh, that personal.
Yeah, like then it's I think you have to develop a thick skin to realize, to be like, when you get the rejection, like it does feel like it's not that we just don't like Pembroke Academy. We don't like
Yeah.
Joey,
Right.
and so, yeah, and so I think there's a resiliency you have to kind of build up in terms of committing to the project and like going forward with it. But then also I think there's something of like, maybe you'll get to a point where it's like, for my own like personal well-being, I can't, I have to put like
Yeah.
Brendan
Put up a
exclamation
wall.
point to bed, because I don't want to put this, have my personal story like be rejected, and then it feels like a rejection of yourself too.
Yeah, just thinking more like legal or like logistical sort of things, like I'll mention like, basically getting commissioner to write the script for Top TV and then them passing on it. And even since, even if they like commission the script, you still are like able to like shop it around to other places or like move on.
Yeah. Once they passed on it on that idea, we were able to take that other places. And and we did. We tried to shop it to one other place. That place passed on it. And technically, I guess we could have held out the desperation that we could go to Timber Places. That would have been totally on the up and up to do. But I think it was the right call to be like, this is people are not wanting this shit now. But yeah, we could have. And I would bet there are other models where maybe there's a hold on it for a period of time. I don't know. But in that situation, we were certainly well within our rights to take it once they passed. It was ours.
I just wanted to ask, just in terms of writing, have you ever been in a situation where you've just like been stuck? Because that's why I am right now.
Yeah.
Like where your story or whatever needs to go. But you're not trying to get there. Like what strategies do you employ to sort of get yourself to get unstuck?
I think there are a bunch of things you can do. I think when you get so focused on like getting from A to B, just having your brain operate in a different mindset helps. So it would be think of like just ways to trick yourself into enjoying writing on the project again is helpful for me. And one thing I do is like write the scene that would never happen in this screenplay or on this TV show. Like Ross murders Phoebe or something like that, and then just like to have like some kind of like fun joy of and like not that would be not that murdering Phoebe was a joy, but just like having like fun like writing and also kind of removing the burden of like this is gonna end up in the finished product and like no one's ever gonna see this, like this is the dumbest idea possible and I'm just gonna write it. Or and then I think another super helpful thing is once you know your main character or any of your characters really well, like if you just brainstorm things of like, what are things that these people would never do? And like Ross would never, like Ross is an archaeologist, so he would never sabotage an archaeological dig. You could think of other ideas. Like it doesn't have to be about Friends. I don't know why I'm fixated on that show. But like, and then like have the intellectual exercise of like, well, what's the context where this character would do the thing that they would never do? And once you figure that out, write that scene. And then, but I think just ways to like get your brain thinking about the project from a different vantage point helps me at least rediscover the fun of writing. And also I think when you take a step away from it, like your brain is subconsciously solving a problem you don't know how to fix right then.
I don't have much to add to that. I would say that the corny version of it is, you got your character and you've got to take it from A to B and you can get to B somehow. Take them to C, take them somewhere else. And what have you learned about them? Like, what do you know, what's new about this character now that might help you get back to me? Or maybe you've got a new idea that you like more, and you can't get them to where you're trying to get them, or you can't think of the plot points to get them there. Where else can you put things that might all of a sudden open up a new road of, oh, that's a place I can pick up something going. And then actually, I guess if they're there, this could actually happen there. Be open to change. I think if you're too locked in on the result, that that can be tricky. That's I know where I'm going, I just need to know how to get there. Well, maybe go and see where you go. And maybe you didn't need to go where you were at the end of the way. I don't know, that sounds a little frou-frou, but I think there's truth in that too. It's real easy to get locked on. I would look back on first drafts of that project in particular, but other things I've written where I was like, when we started, it was supposed to be this. It's not that at all, and I don't regret that it's not that. But if I was drawing a target off in the distance and that's what I was aiming for, I never thought we'd end up over there, but I'm much happier with over there. I guess giving yourself a freedom to change too.
I have to move to another screen, but I wanted to ask, like, there's any guys or from the work in some way?
Yeah, it's hilarious. We didn't really kind of like
Just discards.
we never thought anyone would ask.
Yeah.
The social media stuff is easy enough to like connect with. Like
I know my Twitter account is in the program, so,
Okay.
yeah.
I don't know that mine is probably unless you.
I mean, I can,
Yeah,
my email is,
I can do my
it's BRENDOWL@gmail.com.
And my email is Joey Bland, JOEYBLAND @Yahoo. Joey Bland @Yahoo. And in the program is information about our show. You can find us there, and we're connected through Instagram and Twitter and stuff through the show as well. He's better at social media than I am. He's more prolific on that than I. But yeah, hopefully we come back out in this direction sometime. It's been fun to be back on campus. It's good to be back in. That's his 25th.
Yeah.
15. But thanks for your time, guys. It's nice that people.
Yeah,
came in.
I really appreciate
We
it.
weren't sure how many to expect.
Yeah.
This is perfect number.